Let me welcome everyone again. We are delighted that you're here. We're all, as Estrella described it the other day, we're all sort of like dogs shrugging after waking up after many days away, and we're just trying to get ourselves refocused. And I can't think of a better way to do that than to think about some of the issues that our special guest is going to present to us today. As most of you know, the theme of this year's Millennium Lecture series is Issues in U.S. Public Higher Education. We've invited distinguished speakers to share with us their perspectives on such issues as closing educational achievement gaps across demographic groups, preparing a competitive 21st century workforce, serving as a catalyst for regional economic development, and developing more sustainable funding models. With us today is Jamie Merisotis, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Lumina Foundation for Education, the nation's largest private foundation committed solely to enrolling and graduating more students from college. Under Dr. Merisotis' leadership, Lumina pursues a mission of expanding college access and success, particularly among low-income, minority, and other historically underrepresented populations. Lumina's goal is to increase the percentage of Americans who hold high-quality degrees and credentials to 60% by 2025. Before joining Lumina in January 2008, Jamie Merisotis founded and served 15 years as president of the Washington, D.C.-based Institute for Higher Education Policy, one of the world's premier education research and policy centers. He previously served as Executive Director of the National Commission on Responsibilities for Financing Postsecondary Education, a bipartisan commission appointed by the U.S. President and congressional leaders. He helped create the Corporation for National and Community Service, which includes AmeriCorps, Senior Corps, and Learn and Serve America. He also serves on numerous national and international boards, including Bates College in Maine, Anatolia College in Greece, the Central Indiana Corporate Partnership, and the Children's Museum of Indianapolis. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to our very special guest today, Jamie Merisotis.
Well, thank you so much, President Natalicio. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
I'm so very pleased to be here with you and just delighted to have this opportunity to be part of the Millennium Lecture series. Knowing that the theme of this year's series is issues in U.S. public higher education, I wasn't at all surprised when I looked over the list of recent speakers and saw the names of several longtime friends and colleagues in the field, people like Cliff Adelman and David Longenecker and Congressman Ruben Hinojosa. I'm honored to be among that distinguished company here today. I'm also very happy to be here at UTEP. First of all, because I really believe that this university embodies the future of higher education in this country. And also because UTEP has had a long and very productive relationship with my own organization. In fact, Lumina Foundation and UTEP have been partners for many years, several years before I even arrived at Lumina Foundation. And the work that's distinguished UTEP nationally and as a champion of student success, work that I think reflects the inspired leadership of President Natalicio, well, that work really began more than a decade before Lumina Foundation was even created. I'm also pleased to say that our roots in this community extend to other higher education institutions, including El Paso Community College. Earlier this week, I had the privilege of announcing this year's national winner of the Leah M. Austin Leadership Award under the Achieving the Dream program. El Paso Community College was recognized for its leadership in simultaneously increasing student success while also continuing to support college access. Thanks to an institution-wide embrace of the Achieving the Dream initiative, the college has created a supportive college-going culture that is yielding very exciting results and truly does serve as a national model. So, the question is, what can a Jamie-come-lately like me representing an upstart organization that's not yet reached its 11th birthday, what can I possibly tell all of you that you don't already know? Well, if you'll bear with me this afternoon, I hope that I can offer a somewhat new perspective on the important work that we share. That is, helping more of today's students succeed in higher education and in life. Admittedly, that's a very broad topic, one that raises some important questions, such as, just who are today's students? How can we best help them to succeed? And what does success really mean, anyway? My remarks today will attempt to address all three of these points, and I'll also do my best to answer some of those questions that you may have in the Q&A portion following my talk. Now, before I delve too deeply into the details, let me offer a little bit more background than you heard from the President about myself as well as the organization that I represent. Lumina Foundation is a national foundation established in Indianapolis in the year 2000. We have assets in excess of $1 billion, making us among the top 30 or so largest of any private foundation in the nation in terms of its asset size. That makes us, as President Natalicio said, the single largest foundation in the nation that focuses exclusively on that mission of getting more Americans into and through college. I became the foundation's president in 2008 after spending nearly 15 years as president of the Institute for Higher Education Policy, a Washington-based research and policy organization that I founded in 1993. Lumina has always been dedicated to the mission of increasing college access and success. Since my arrival, we've worked hard to focus our efforts in pursuing that mission in a particular way, in getting to that big goal that President Natalicio described to you, or what we call Goal 2025. That is, by the year 2025, we want 60% of Americans to hold high-quality college degrees and credentials. As you probably know, the current percentage of Americans with degrees is below 40%, well below the college attainment rates in many other developed countries. What's worse, our nation's overall attainment rate has remained stagnant for decades. And throughout that time, that rate has persistently and significantly been lower than 40% among America's low-income, non-white, and first-generation students. My friends, these are dangerous and very disturbing trends, whether viewed in the context of the global economy or examined in the light of the demographic changes that are sweeping this nation. That's why Lumina sees this big goal as critical, even though we know it represents an enormous national challenge. We know it won't be easy to increase the proportion of Americans with college degrees by 20 percentage points in the next 15 years. Still, we recognize Goal 2025 for what it is, a national imperative. What's more, we're convinced that it's attainable, as long as we work with a variety of effective partners and work according to a plan. At Lumina, our plan is clear. It identifies three critical outcomes, three significant results that must be produced for the big goal to be reached. These three outcomes, quite simply, are increased preparation for college, greater success in college, and greater productivity of the higher education system. PSP, preparation, success, productivity, and frankly, all three must be tackled ASAP. Now, by preparation, we mean that students must be prepared academically, financially, and socially for success in education beyond high school, and that these three factors must be seen as co-equals in the process. When we talk about success, we're saying that college attainment rates must increase significantly, which means students must be properly supported so that they actually finish the programs that they start. And finally, by productivity, we mean that higher education must become more efficient, more innovative, and more cost-effective. These gains in productivity are vital because they'll increase capacity and allow the system to provide greater high-quality education to many, many more students. So that's Lumina's approach, working simultaneously on all three of these outcomes and with a variety of partners, including UTEP, as a means of reaching the big goal of 60% of attainment by 2025. Now, if there's one thing that we've learned in the work that we've done so far, it's that we won't reach that big goal unless we concentrate now on serving 21st century students, the students of today and tomorrow, not the students of yesterday. If you think about it, American higher education was built for the 19th century student. Some might even say the students of the 18th century. Borrowing its traditions from medieval Europe, the system was designed to educate a favored few. The sons, and yes, back in those days it was almost exclusively the sons of the wealthy elite. Of course, your predecessors here at the Texas School of Mines and Metallurgy never really fit that traditional mold. And even in the institutions that did fit the mold, much has changed over the decades, most dramatically in the last half of the 20th century. Thanks to the GI Bill, to the development of the community college system, and to many other advances, the doors of college have opened much wider. Still, even as more students go through these doors, far too many students continue to be left out, individuals whose talents and skills we desperately need as a society. And there's another problem. Over the decades, too little has been changed behind those college doors. Systems, structures, and practices have not adapted quickly enough to properly and productively serve this new group of 21st century students, a group more diverse and variable than any 18th or 19th century college professor could have ever imagined. The 21st century student runs the gamut, ethnically, racially, and socially, from recent high school graduates to second career retirees, from part-time distance learners to full-time resident students, from GED completers to certificate seekers to evening MBA students to PhD candidates, with roots in every country from Mexico to Malaysia to Mali. Speaking of these people as 21st century students isn't just mere wordplay. This is about substance, not semantics. We must recognize these 21st century students as essential to our future. We must change the dialogue from a deficit model to a growth model, one in which all sectors of society, industry, government, education institutions, communities, all sectors see these students as the future leaders of the nation, as taxpayers, and as contributors to the quality of life that we all cherish. Clearly, no one-size-fits-all system of higher education will work for 21st century students, and it won't serve us as a nation. To reach that big goal, America needs all types of students to succeed, and they must succeed in far greater numbers. That means we need a student-centered system, one that is flexible and accessible and accountable and ultimately committed to high quality. This system must meet each student where she is and offer the support that she needs to succeed. It must ensure quality by fostering genuine learning, not mere program completion. It must truly prepare students for work and for life in an increasingly global society. These factors are what will define a post-secondary system that serves the 21st century student, a responsive system that acts as an effective engine for the development of our nation's most precious national asset, human capital. As employment trends clearly demonstrate, we have no time to waste in developing that asset. A well-educated workforce is absolutely critical to short-term economic recovery and to long-term economic growth. Studies by noted labor economist Tony Carnevale at the Georgetown Center for Education and the Economy predict that by 2018, 63% of all American jobs will require some form of post-secondary education and training. That is a huge increase since the mid-1970s, when less than 30% of jobs required anything beyond a high school education. Again, the urgency isn't just economic. it's also demographic. Census estimates predict that by 2050, the citizens who used to be called minorities in our country will consist of the majority of Americans. And in the interim, our school-age population is expected to grow by 19 million, 17 million of whom will be Latino. Many, though not all, of those students will be first generation and from immigrant backgrounds. Of course, we can't exclusively focus on immigrant students or first generation students as we seek to attain Goal 2025. But we will certainly fail to reach it if we don't see these students as essential. After all, we are a nation of immigrants, built on and constantly renewed by the energy and the innovation of a diverse population. If we're to maintain our momentum and feed the spirit of regeneration, education must be a constant factor in this equation. Education empowers individuals, and we all benefit when that power is turned on. As a society, we need to make sure that that energy flows at its maximum rate. We must find ways to tap into the enormous potential that diversity truly represents. Recent research has brought new proof of that potential, just in case anyone in this room actually might need the proof. A recent study by the Fiscal Policy Institute shows that immigrants played a central role in the cycle of economic growth over the course of the last 2 decades. The study showed that the fastest economic growth between 1990 and 2008 occurred in cities that experienced large influxes of immigrants, including many workers in lower-paying service and blue-collar jobs. For example, in metropolitan Denver, where the economy doubled during the period studied, nearly 2/3 of immigrants held those jobs. A second study, this one conducted by noted author and thought leader Richard Florida, belies the notion that immigrants pose an economic burden on the areas in which they settle. The study, which you may have seen was reported in The Atlantic, actually shows the opposite to be true, that earnings in a state are positively associated with the percentage of immigrants in the population. According to Florida, a state's openness to immigrants effectively boosts wages by enabling it to, quote, better compete for more highly educated and highly skilled workers across demographic, ethnic, and racial categories. So clearly the nation's immigrant population, and in fact the broader population of all types of 21st century students, represents tremendous potential. It's a reservoir of talent that's deep, that's wide, and that's expanding. Our task, really our duty, is to properly develop that potential, to give those individuals every chance to contribute. And as I hope I've made clear today, that means we need to give these students every chance to succeed in college, which is exactly what's been happening here for decades at UTEP. This institution's involvement in the College Readiness Initiative and your partnership with EPCC have helped prepare thousands of high school students for the rigors of college coursework and assisted hundreds of others as they made the transition to a 4-year campus. The studies that you've conducted with Lumina's support, including one that's underway right now as part of our Minority-Serving Institutions Models of Success program, have added a great deal to our understanding of what helps Mexican American and other students persist, transfer, and succeed. These examples merely scratch the surface of UTEP's efforts, of course, but they provide clear evidence that the approach taken at this institution is both student-centered and learner-focused. And that is the only approach, we think, that can generate the high-quality degrees and credentials that our big goal demands. That leads me to the third question that I posed at the beginning of my remarks, which is, what do we mean by student success? We spent a great deal of time today and previously on the first two questions. Who are today's students, and what can we do to help them succeed? And I hope I've shed a little bit of light on both. But it's that third question, how to define the high-quality credential, that clearly identifies a successful student? That is a question that is increasingly on our minds at Lumina. Our thinking has led us to what might seem like an obvious answer. Any useful definition of educational quality must center on learning outcomes. That seemingly obvious answer is actually layered with complexity. After all, to arrive at that definition of quality, institutions and instructors must ask, what exactly should our students be learning? What knowledge and skills must they have so that they can thrive in work and in life? And how can we better measure our effectiveness in fostering learning that is both rigorous and relevant? In other words, how do we actually demonstrate the value that we add to this process? And finally, how can we make sure that credits and degrees and credentials actually represent what students should know and be able to do on the job and in life? Now, these questions are anything but academic. They really are key, not only in ensuring the success of individual students, but in helping to forge the type of higher education that the 21st century demands. Again, one that is student-centered, that's flexible, that's accessible, and that's accountable. At Lumina, one of our most recent efforts to tackle these questions is something that we are very proud of. Just 2 weeks ago, Lumina released what we call a degree qualifications profile. It's a baseline set of reference points for what students at any institution should know and be able to do to earn their degrees, regardless of their field of specialization. Now, the degree profile is still very much in experimental form, and we fully intend for it to be shaped and refined significantly in the coming months and years. But its ultimate goal is to provide all stakeholders, students, faculty, policymakers, and the public, with a core definition of essential learning and a clear roadmap for attaining that learning, or rather, a map showing a set of alternative routes for attaining it. Now, one central idea of the degree profile is that students should work on real-life problems as part of their college curriculum. In other words, they should work on tasks that simultaneously develop the skills that they will need and also show what they're actually able to do with their knowledge. Whatever tasks students undertake, however, should help them gain certain expected competencies, the specific types of knowledge, skill, applied learning, and civic problem solving that all 21st century students will need if they hope to contribute to our society. Now, it's important to point out that the degree profile is not about standardization. We know that there are any number of approaches that can lead to genuine, substantive learning. But it is about clearly defining that end result, and that ensuring that the result is reached. In short, the degree profile focuses relentlessly and purposefully on the outcomes of higher education. And that is absolutely where we must be focused. It's become clear to us, and we think to anyone who thoughtfully considers the challenges facing higher education, that the current system won't get us where we need to go as a nation. Demographic trends and economic pressures compel change. Yes, the current system still serves some students well, but it simply cannot conduct business as usual and serve the vast numbers of new students who must be served if we hope to reach that big goal. In short, as I've already said, we need a more productive system. Now, I realize that in this budget-strapped period, any reference to improved productivity or increased efficiency can become a code word for more cutbacks. I assure you that is not at all what we have in mind. The idea isn't to spend less, but to spend what you have very wisely. That means investing in the success of the institutions that serve students best, that can best adapt to the changing needs of society, those that are already on their way to becoming part of a more vibrant and relevant post-secondary system. Clearly, we're not there yet, but we can certainly pinpoint some of the attributes of this ideal more productive system. For example, in such a system, all states would have transparent higher education readiness standards that are aligned across the education spectrum, from K-12 through postgraduate work. Second, colleges and universities would be financially rewarded primarily for rates of student success, not for mere enrollment. Third, students would be able to accumulate their learning from a variety of providers and partners and seamlessly add them up to build universally acceptable degrees. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, students, employers, and education leaders would all have a clear and shared understanding of the skills, knowledge, and abilities represented by each credential that a student might earn. This is really the key to defining and measuring what success actually means. Again, this ideal system would be truly student-centered and committed to quality and to transparency. Building such a system won't be easy, of course. In fact, it's a transformative effort that will require years of work by a range of dedicated partners. But the work is definitely underway, and we at Lumina are very proud to be a part of it. And we're also very pleased to have UTEP as a partner in this work. As I said at the very beginning of my remarks, that we focus on this issue of the future of higher education. Well, I'm here to tell you, my friends, the future of higher education is already here at UTEP and across the country. Many of your peers in American higher education would do well to model your behavior, your focus on serving these 21st century students, your acceptance of new and innovative ideas, and most important, your commitment to continuous improvement. What you're doing now, and in my view, what you've really done for decades, is very good. But what you must know is that simply continuing to do what's good isn't going to be good enough. We live in challenging times, and higher education must be first to respond to those challenges, because higher education is the key to helping everyone else respond. And so, in closing, I urge you, keep striving, continue to adapt and improve, and renew your commitment to reaching that big goal. Thank you very much.
Okay, so Merisotis has agreed to respond to questions or interact with your thoughts, and if you go to the microphones that are in the aisles, that will enable us to all be heard.
Good afternoon, and thank you for coming. This is probably an unfair question, since the publishers academically Adrift didn't release the full manuscript until last week, and then not only was UTEP shut down, but distribution was limited. Nonetheless, it's received a great deal of attention in professional literature, in the Chronicle, on NPR, and in the major media. The author's contentions stand apart from what the institution's initiatives may be, and talk, as far as I can tell, about student behaviors and changes over the last decades. In their analysis, it appears to be claimed that there is, among the current cohort, less investment in the educational process than there has been before. It also appears, from my reading of secondary sources, that they further assert that institutions have responded to that not by extracting a higher level of behavior, but rather recognizing with increased rewards a lower level of performance. This is the present population. How do we address that while ensuring that we are doing a service to both future students in the larger numbers you expect, to them and to the society, which has, in your estimation and in mine, a greater need for such competencies? It looks like we're going in two directions. Lower student performance, at the same time, greater expectations. Thank you.
Let me say a couple of things about Academically Adrift. Probably first and most important, we funded it. So we are actually the contributors to the work, that we did not control the content, as we do not do in any of that work, that grant work that we fund. Look, Academically Adrift is a useful milestone on a timeline of our understanding of what is and is not working in terms of our understanding of what students are learning. I think it's getting a lot of attention in part because it uses that tool, that one tool, the collegiate learning assessment, which is attempting to measure some of those generalizable skills, critical thinking, analytic problem solving, ability to communicate, etc. And as such, I take it for what it's worth. I had a chance to read it in draft form and in final form, and I think it's a useful analysis. We should, however, not overinterpret the results, I think, of that single analysis, and I think the authors would agree with this. I think the challenge for us to tackle is really to understand what is it that the CLA is measuring, and are those the things that we think are the top priorities in terms of what we expect, in terms of those generalizable skills and knowledge that we get from higher education. In other words, the learning that any credential should represent should have two anchors. Generalizable skills, things that don't matter what the credential is in, what the degree is, and content knowledge. So if you get a degree in chemistry, you should be able to think critically and analyze problems, and you should also know something about chemistry. Both of those things are true, and those should be ratcheted up as we move along the continuum from associate to bachelor's to master's, etc. The challenge of what Academically Adrift is stating to us is that what they're measuring, students are not doing well enough to be successful. In other words, what they're saying is only about a third of the students had added value from what they got out of higher education. We should take that into account. I think that that's a valuable perspective. But I think that it presupposes that we have some agreement on what students should be learning. And I don't think we have that agreement. I think across institutions, across states, across systems, there are very different assumptions. We have 7 different regional accrediting organizations in this country, each with different standards for whether or not an institution of higher education gets accredited. We have different accrediting standards within the disciplines, within the areas of study. This creates this sort of cacophony in which the most important question of all, from my perspective, what does a degree actually mean, is a question that we cannot answer. So the challenge, I think, that you've put, and the one that we need to tackle, is how do we create a better understanding, a shared consensus? I don't mean in any sort of standard way, but in a broader sense about what those credentials should actually mean. What should students know and be able to do with the credential? We need that because the demand that we're getting for more degrees, driven somewhat, or perhaps even primarily, by economic challenges, what we're seeing from our international competitors, but also, frankly, just the changing nature of work at any level, requires the kinds of things you should be getting from post-secondary education. We need to deliver on those things, and we need to get greater clarity about what they need.
Hello? Hi. I'm a little bit nervous. I must say what your presentation had been really inspiring. And I graduated this December, and basically what I've been doing is writing this notebook, a lot of my college experiences that I've had. And what I've seen with what you said, we're trying to increase the number of higher education standards and everything you said for up to 60%. The biggest thing that I've seen is that a lot of students who do attend college or start from the ground level, junior, senior year going up, is they get lost. A lot of information is given to them, and they do retain it, but you're asking a 17, 18-year-old to go make a life for themselves and go maybe sometimes far away from home. And a lot of the times, you run into a lot of situations like coming out of high school, the FAFSA, trying to figure out loans, grants, scholarships, how to fill out the information. A process of even where the financial aid building is on campus, a lot of kids get lost. Also during the college experience jobs, work, study, part-time, full-time, where, how, when to get a job, being able to balance between work and school, the understanding of taxes, W-2s. A lot of students who come up into college are not educated on the basis of the functionality of the process of how the tax system works, and you're asking someone to fill out the FAFSA.
Right.
And I mean, the information, there's organizations and everything like that that are out there that's there to help students, but a lot of the information is not attainable in terms of low-income students who are trying to attain a higher level of education. And as in school, understanding the different levels of degrees and certifications that are possible, that are available to students. A lot of kids coming out of high school don't understand you can get an associate, you can get a bachelor's, you can get a master's, you can get certifications and different qualifications. But they know those things, but they don't know exactly the specifics about those. Also, in terms of school supplies, the cost of books, being able to find cheaper alternatives and outsource, the big competitors, especially, I love UTEP, but I mean, it's breaking my wallet every time I get my information. And also, I mean, for as in teachers, which ones to take, which is a good profession to have, as in you actually need someone from your class and actually use a book like that as the substance have that issue in. And also, they use other resources like GradeMyProfessor.com.
Right. Of course.
I mean, just to be able to find the easy teacher or find the best teacher to suit your ability. And then from school supplies, just a whole rundown of student lifestyle and the culture of being a student in itself is pretty difficult in some ways because a lot of the information that's given to us is so scattered. And you're asking us to be resourceful and be able to attain those different things. And I mean, the effort's out there. That the programs are there, the programs are available. But the problem is that there isn't a specific organization or company that's dedicated to presenting that information to students.
Sure. That's right. So, go ahead. Do you want to finish?
Oh, sorry. I was asking, what is your corporation trying to do?
So, what you've hit on, you've actually hit on about 8 different things. So, that's okay. That's okay. What you've hit on is complexity. That's the common theme, right? Complexity creates challenges for students. And I think this is a very important and frankly profound point for a variety of reasons that I'll try to explain. I don't think there's any ill intent on anybody's part here in getting to the system that we now have that makes it complex. In other words, there isn't a secret group that's planning to make the road between you and your degree really difficult. The challenge is that these are complex enterprises, and the complexity of what higher education institutions try to do makes it very difficult from the user perspective, from what you might call, if you were in the private sector, the customer perspective, the consumer perspective. And that complexity, you hit on several of them, includes things like the financial aid form, the FAFSA. So, I filled out the FAFSA years ago. I'm a first-generation student from an immigrant family. I filled out the FAFSA. My parents couldn't understand it, so I had to fill it out for them. It is 3 or 4 times more complex than when I did it. Anyone who tries to sit down and do this, and I challenge the PhDs in the room to try to do this, it is a very difficult thing to do. And if you are someone whose family doesn't have educational experience, who hasn't been through the process before, it is very intimidating. There's that one question you probably remember that says, fill out this other worksheet in order to answer that question. And it takes you about 30 minutes to fill out the worksheet to answer one of the questions. So, complexity, I understand, is a big challenge. The system also creates complexity because of what the head of an organization called Complete College America, Stan Jones, calls excessive choice. Now, excessive choice is a very difficult concept in higher education. Excessive choice is what he's essentially suggesting is that in our efforts to try to serve more students and to serve them in different ways, we've actually created a cacophony that makes things very confusing. Curriculum, for example, where the requirements in order to be able to achieve a credential. You know, there's a reason why a significant number of students who should be graduating with a bachelor's degree in 120 hours actually take 130 or 140 or 150. It is the system of being so complex that creates those challenges. We get that. The trade-off that you face is at what expense? What is it that you want to curtail? Because the issue of complexity is really driven by the university's need to try to do more, and that's the challenge that I think we face in the system. Now there are efforts to actually create improvements in this. These productivity efforts that I mentioned that are not about make people do more with less, but in fact improve the efficiency of processes and systems. There's a lot of really good work going on in a variety of states. There's also a very serious effort to simplify the financial aid form that has been discussed in Congress, and that I think has a good chance of happening sometime soon. Our policymaking processes are maddeningly slow. This should have happened a long time ago. But I think that the understanding that technology has actually given us opportunities to simplify that process is something that's being taken very seriously. But the complexity that you talk about is real. There are millions of students in this country right now, like you, that get overwhelmed by that process, and unlike you, don't finish, don't actually get their credential because the system frustrates them and they leave. So that's a challenge for us. That's a big challenge for us. And I might add, just as a final thought, that we need to do a better job of engaging those people who did leave because of the complexity, re-engaging them, getting them back into the system, and getting them to complete that credential. The benefits to that individual, and therefore to us as society, are enormous. And I think that seeing students as leavers, as people who are gone, is a big mistake. And I know UTEP and some other institutions do a good job of trying to reach out to people who have left to try to bring them back. That has to be very high on the list, because the persisters, the people who stay all the way through, they ultimately are rewarded when they get that credential. But I recognize the system is very complex, so thank you.
Also, with going through all those things, I've also been trying to figure out ways that I make the process simpler, and actually how to go out and try to recruit more I guess the interest of high school students, and motivate the idea of a higher education and self-betterment through that process. Basically, right now it's in my notebook, it's an idea, but I'm calling it All Student Access. And what All Student Access does is a place, an incorporation, that somewhere students can go to and gain accessibility on the latest resources and information. And basically what ASA does is a reflection of the student culture, but not just a reflection, but a supplement to the student culture.
It's a great idea. I have an idea for you. There's an organization called the National College Advising Corps. This is an organization that actually takes current college students and recent graduates and turns them into counselors for people who are in high school. It creates more of a sort of generational connection for people and helps them understand, hey, the truth is, when you got somebody who looks like me and they're talking to a 17-year-old, it doesn't work so well. So I've reluctantly come to accept that. Seeing people who've been through the system and who've been through it recently and who can help negotiate their ways through the challenges is really important, and I very much like your idea, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm a graduate student. I started on the 2-year plan, but for reasons I am now on the 3-year plan. The biggest problem is there are 2 classes left in my graduate program. They're only taught by one professor, and he only teaches them one per semester. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get into one class, and I'm going to have to do another year to take it again. You mentioned that a universal kind of requirement across the board. UTEP has some connections to the other UT systems where theory, if the exact same class was taught in Austin or at any of the other schools, I could online take that class.
Right.
Do you see that as a potential nowadays where maybe it shorten, instead of my 3-year experience, kind of back to 2 years, more classes that are exactly the same, just different professors and strategy, but basic curriculum taught across the board, across the country, across the world? Is that a technological
Yeah.
goal that we're striving for?
So I have two answers. The first one is absolutely. There's certain coursework for which you should be able to gain access to that coursework online using technology. It depends on the field of study. It depends on which course. There's a lot of ifs, ands, and buts in there. But there are lots of things that we are seeing in terms of the online delivery of coursework that I'm very encouraged by. And I have to say, I spent many years as a pretty significant critic of online delivery of higher education, and even I acknowledge it's getting a lot better. So I think that's a plus. The challenge, though, that I want to be clear about is that what we don't want is a homogeneous system. What we don't want is delivery of the same material in the same way at every institution. I think one of the strengths of American higher education is the diversity of perspectives that we bring to learning. We do need that common understanding of what students should know and be able to do in terms of those areas of general competency that I talked about. But we should not end up with a standardized system of curriculum for all students in the same kind of programs, because I think that would lead to a lack of innovation, a lack of creativity in terms of what people eventually do with their degrees that I think would not be advantageous for us, either economically or in terms of our cultural and social well-being. So I think that I'm encouraged by what I'm seeing in terms of online delivery. We're investing more and more in terms of innovations in terms of online delivery because we think it represents great potential. But we also have to recognize that online delivery should not be a substitute for, or should not become a method for standardization. Standardization could have negative outcomes for the system. So thank you. Yes?
Sure, at the beginning of your discourse, you touched upon the great baggage that our higher education system carries from the 19th or even the 18th century. And part of this, of course, is that the university is made out of discrete and highly autonomous colleges, you know? Yet some of the most marvelous innovations of recent years have been the products of interdisciplinary study. Do you think that this is a major thing that needs to be addressed in undergraduate education or only at the postgraduate level? What is your priority on this?
Yeah, it's a big challenge. I mean, what you're posing is tough to generalize about. You know, I would say that in general, our focus in higher education needs to be on improvement of undergraduate education. That's where a lot of our problems lie. Not because of structural issues. I'm not sure that's what the issue is. It is because we've tended to proceed along with a system that hasn't adapted to the changing nature of the people who we're serving in the system, those 21st century students that I was talking about. And now that we have clear evidence that the demand for people with these credentials is so high, I think the question is, what should those curricular changes really look like in ways that best meet the economic needs, but that don't drive us down this path where everyone ends up being educated in the same way in very narrow specializations. And it's a tricky balance. I recognize that it's a very tricky balance in terms of the work. Other countries have done it. Other countries have made progress, at least, and I think that's something that we can learn from. But we need to fashion a unique American solution to the problem that we have, and that's something that I want to focus on. So I'm not sure if I've answered your question, but you know, it's difficult to generalize about those issues of structure because institutions are really quite different.
Which country, sir, do you think has advanced most in interdisciplinary progress on the undergraduate level, so I can look into it?
Yeah, so there's interesting places that maybe you wouldn't think of from an American perspective. Places that I know of, because I've done some work, include Finland, Korea, places that are looking at dramatic change in terms of this work. For example, at an interdisciplinary level like South Africa, have gone through pretty significant changes. South Africa is a country I know well, and I spent a lot of time there. And South Africa went through dramatic transformation of its higher education system for a very simple reason, because the system was overwhelmingly skewed toward educating a distinct minority of the population. And they recognized post-apartheid that they had to develop a very different system. So they had to think through the system of what should these qualifications actually mean. And so I'd encourage you to look at those kind of countries as places. There's a lot of literature on South Africa, by the way, so you might want to start there.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Doctor, a very intelligent presentation. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Yes.
Outstanding.
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Someone? Yes.
Jamie, if I may, as a guest, President, I want to push you on one area. Understanding that Lumina has its goal for 2025, the administration has launched its goal for getting the United States back as the leader with undergraduate degrees in particular.
By 2020.
By 2020.
Did that wrong, you need 5 more years.
You're going to negotiate the 5 years. But what are the levers? When you had, notwithstanding the reductionist sort of view of academia at Adrift, and the kinds of questions that the students raised, about the practicality of maneuvering the college experience, the educational experience. What are the levers, that the president and the faculty here have to face over the next 10 years, or have to sort of kind of twist to get to that goal? What I want to hear your opinions about: do we lever time to degree? Do we lever financial aid? Do we lever curricular reform? Which are the top 3 ideas that say this is what will move this needle in higher ed?
Yeah, so we need to, my answer is going to be unsatisfactory to you, but I'll give it anyway, which is we need to turn a lot of different dials. One thing I've learned from many years working in the public policy context is that the worst solutions are usually the single solutions, right? If we just do this, then we get that result. It defies human nature, it defies experience, it defies reality. So things don't work that way. So the kinds of things that we need to do are several. And let me just mention a few that I didn't raise today beyond the things that I mentioned. We have a major rock in the pipe in higher education across this country in terms of developmental education, remedial education. That is a significant barrier to success for students. And the way I try to describe the challenge of remedial education is this way. Students don't want to take it, many faculty don't want to teach it, and policymakers don't want to pay for it. Then we're surprised at how many people fail in our developmental work. We've stigmatized developmental education to an extraordinary degree in this country, and I think that's a big mistake. Now, I know all the arguments, I've been through all the discussions about developmental education represents the failure of prior education experiences. Yes and no. It does for some students who are not being well served at the K-12 system. A lot of students, and this institution knows as well, who have those kind of needs are in fact adult students for whom their prior education experience was a long time ago. And that represents a different set of challenges. Developmental education is also a problem, I think, because we haven't really rethought how we deliver developmental education. The Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching, which I think does the best work on the scholarship of teaching and learning, is doing work now on rethinking developmental mathematics as a core, sort of a gateway to actually changing the curricular development of developmental math, or developmental coursework in general. So developmental ed is a big challenge. Another big challenge, for lack of a better term, is our ability to effectively engage those adult students in ways that have meaning and resonance for them. We've experienced this now in a lot of states that went through very significant job loss. States like Michigan and California in terms of the economic crisis. What we know about this economic crisis, unlike any of the prior recessions we've been through as a country, is that most of the jobs that got eliminated aren't coming back. So those individuals must get post-secondary education training in order to be useful in the modern economy, where they're going to be stuck in a low-skill, low-wage environment, when in some cases they were actually doing reasonably well without having any sort of post-secondary credential. But systemically, from the perspective of faculty, from the perspective of people who lead institutions, serving those students is very different than serving the students who are there coming out of high school, or who are there coming from a different kind of educational experience, the transfer student, et cetera. And that's a very big challenge that I think we've got to tackle. I mean, I think many of you here know the data. 1 in 5 American adults has gone to college, but has nothing to show for it, has no credential. Re-engaging that population, retraining the people who no longer have the skills to be effective workers in the modern economy, those are things that we are going to have to really retool what we do in higher education. In terms of a lot of the things that the recent graduate was saying to us, right? It's those application processes and the ability to access information and counseling and support and other things in ways that are relevant to their life. And so that's another significant issue that I think we've got to tackle. The list is fairly lengthy, but I think there are a lot of things, a lot of those dials that we need to turn. The key, in my view, is to have greater acceptance within the academy that we've got to come together and do this. I see a lot of sort of differentiation of perspective in colleges and universities that I go to across the country. You know, the sort of classic faculty administration tensions, but also issues related to across disciplines, across colleges and schools, et cetera. I think we need to get past those kind of barriers and create some common understanding of what we're trying to achieve with these universities, because the stakes are far too high for the country. So thank you very much.
First, I want to thank Jamie for taking time to come from all the way from Indiana to be with us. I really enjoyed the lecture tremendously. We're going to make you an honor of things that line up. Then, Indiana's well known for basketball, but so is UTEP. And so, I'm going to give you a copy of the Disney film, Glory Road, that was named about the 1966 championship.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. It, I think, will provoke a lot of discussion, and we thank you so much for doing that. Provoking discussion is what we like to do around here, and so I'm very grateful to you for that. There's a reception just outside. There'll be an opportunity to interact with each other and with our speaker, and I hope you'll join us. Thank you very, very much for coming.